There is a moment that occurs in certain homes and almost nowhere else that the ancient teachers called the most financially significant 60 seconds of the day. It does not happen in a bank. It does not happen at a desk or on a trading floor. It happens at the dining table. After the meal is finished, after the plates are cleared, in that in-between moment when the food is done and the person has not yet stood up and moved on to whatever comes next. In most homes in the modern world, that moment is empty. People push back their chairs, check their phones, move into the kitchen, move into the evening. The moment passes without notice. In the homes I am talking about, the homes that have carried abundance across generations, through exile, through economic collapse, through circumstances that should have broken them financially and did not, that moment is never empty. It is filled with something specific, something spoken, something that the sages of the Jewish tradition understood to be one of the primary mechanisms by which the channel of provision in a household is either sealed or widened. I am going to teach you exactly what it is today. My name is Rabbi Naomi, and I have spent 37 years inside the sacred texts of Jewish wisdom, the Talmud, the Siddur, the writings of the Kabbalistic masters, teachings passed not in classrooms but around tables, in kitchens, from grandmothers to grandchildren, from teachers to students, in study houses that smelled of old wood and lamp oil. The practice I am going to share today is called Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after the meal. And before you hear those words and assume you already know what this is, I need you to stay with me. Because what I am going to show you is not the religious surface of this practice. I am going to show you the financial architecture encoded inside it, the specific mechanism by which generations of Jewish families use this practice to govern the frequency of abundance in their homes. GK, I need you to watch it, OGK. Leave before I reach the final element, the specific principle at the heart of this practice that almost no one GK. You will miss the piece that makes everything else work. The knowledge is only useful when it is complete. Before we go any further, I want you to type the words "I receive" and "I return" in the comments right now. Write it before we move forward. Those 4 words are not random. GK described the entire spiritual architecture of what I am about to teach you. When you write them publicly, you are making a declaration that positions you as someone who understands the mechanism, before you have even heard the full explanation. That declaration creates a resonance. Write it now. I want to start with a mystery, because the mystery is where the real teaching lives. Why do certain families stay wealthy across generations? Not just wealthy in the first generation, accumulated through effort, through risk, through the founder's drive. Wealthy in the second, the third, the fourth, despite market crashes, despite wars, despite every economic disruption that erases the wealth of most families within 2 generations. This is not a rhetorical question. The social science research on generational wealth preservation is actually quite specific. 90% of family wealth is gone by the 3rd generation. The pattern is so reliable, it has its own name in estate planning circles. The first generation builds it. The second generation maintains it with effort. The third generation inherits the residue. This is the pattern for 90% of families. The 10% who escape it, who preserve and compound across 4, 5, 6 generations, share something. It is not a better financial advisor. It is not a superior investment strategy. The researchers who study these families consistently report that the differentiating factor is cultural. Something inside the home, something practiced, something transmitted from generation to generation, not through inheritance documents, but through daily ritual. In the Jewish tradition, I have watched this pattern for nearly 4 decades, and one of the most consistent distinguishing features of families that carry abundance across generations is this: they do not leave the table without the blessing. They practice Birkat Hamazon, not as religion, as architecture. Let me tell you the first time I understood this in a way that went beyond intellectual knowledge. I was 34 years old. I was living in Jerusalem. My husband and I had been married for 6 years, and we were in the middle of a period I can only describe as a sustained financial drought. Not catastrophic, we had enough, but not enough for what we were trying to build. He was building a small business, I was teaching, and no matter how hard we both worked, the numbers would not move past a certain threshold. I remember one Shabbat evening. It was autumn. There was a particular smell in the air that Jerusalem has in autumn, cold stone and something like smoke. We had finished the meal and I was already standing up, already thinking about the week ahead, already in my head with the problems that needed solving. And my husband's grandmother, who was staying with us that week, put her hand on the table very quietly and said nothing. She just did not stand up. She sat there, both hands on the table, and waited. I looked at her. She looked at me, and then she began to sing, slowly, in a voice that had 83 years of Friday nights in it. She sang Birkat Hamazon from memory, as she had done after every meal, every day, for 8 decades. I had heard this blessing hundreds of times. I had recited it myself many times. But watching her that evening, I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. She was not rushing through a religious obligation. She was doing something with her full body. Her hands were flat on the table. Her back was straight. Her eyes were half closed. She was fully present in the act in a way that I, in my 34 years of reciting prayers, had never been fully present. And when she finished, she sat for another moment in silence before she stood. She looked at me and she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "You cannot go from receiving to running. There must be a moment in between where you acknowledge what was given. That moment is the gate. When you skip it, you run straight past the gate and wonder why the house stays empty." I did not apply this immediately. I want to be honest with you about that. I heard the wisdom. I felt the truth of it. And then life resumed, and I moved on. 3 more months of the same financial ceiling. I remember the specific morning I decided to take it seriously. It was a cold December Tuesday. We had received a bill we were not expecting, and I was sitting at the breakfast table after my husband had left and the children had gone to school, and the house was very quiet, and I thought about the grandmother's words. I made a decision that morning that we would treat Birkat Hamazon not as a prayer to recite, but as an architecture to inhabit. Every meal, both of us, together when possible, alone when not rushed, present, in the correct posture, with the specific words and the specific intention the tradition encodes. For 7 weeks, the external circumstances did not change. I want to be very clear about that. 7 weeks is a long time to commit to a practice when you see no movement. But in the 8th week, my husband received a call from a former colleague who had been completely out of his life for 4 years. The colleague had started a new venture and wanted a specific kind of partnership that aligned exactly with what my husband had been building. It was not an overnight transformation, but it was the first movement we had felt in almost 2 years, and it compounded. Within 6 months, the business had crossed the threshold that had felt sealed to us for so long. I am not telling you that Birkat Hamazon is a financial formula. I am telling you that what I have seen in my own life and in the lives of dozens of people I have taught over 3 decades is that when you close the cycle of a meal correctly, something in the frequency of what you attract begins to change. A woman came to me about 4 years ago. She was in her late 30s, had inherited a modest amount of money from her father, had tried to build it carefully, and had watched it quietly erode over 5 years. Not through bad decisions exactly, but through a kind of slow leaking that she could not identify or stop. She described her financial life as feeling like a bucket with a hole she could not find. We talked for a long time about her daily practices. I asked her specifically about meals. She described what most people describe: eating while working, eating while on her phone, eating standing up at the kitchen counter, rarely sitting at a table at all. The meal was a transaction: food in, energy available, move on. There was no closing, no acknowledgement, no boundary between receiving and continuing. We worked together on this specifically. I gave her the practice I am going to give you. She committed to it. Not every meal immediately. She started with dinner. 1 meal a day, fully seated, fully closed, with the blessing. For the first 2 weeks, she reported feeling calmer, but seeing nothing financial shift. In the 4th week, she found an error in a contract she had signed 18 months earlier, an error that, when corrected, returned a meaningful sum of money to her that she had simply not known she was owed. She did not manufacture that discovery. She was not looking for it. It found her. In the 2nd month, a business contact she had not spoken to in years reached out with an opportunity that became one of her most stable sources of income for the following 2 years. Again, I am not presenting these as proofs of a transaction. I am sharing what I have observed when the practice is held with precision and consistency. Now I am going to give you the practice in full. This is the architecture. It has 4 components. Each one is precise. The precision matters because each component addresses a different layer of the mechanism. Remove one and the architecture loses its structural integrity. The way a table with 3 legs instead of 4 remains technically functional, but no longer stable. The first component is the physical posture before the blessing begins. Both hands must rest flat on the table, not in your lap, not holding the last piece of bread, flat on the table. This is not symbolic etiquette. The ancient teachers of the Kabbalah explain this through the principle of the hands as channels of giving and receiving. The right hand channels giving, the left hand channels receiving. When both hands rest flat on the surface where the meal was taken, you are creating a circuit. You are completing the act of reception. You received the meal. The hands on the table are the physical completion of that receipt. Most people leave the table with their hands already in motion toward the next task. The channel closes incomplete. The first component is simply this: before the blessing begins, both hands flat on the table where the meal was eaten. The second component is the verbal acknowledgement. Birkat Hamazon is a multi-part blessing, and I am not going to give you the full liturgical text in this video. That belongs to the more complete teaching. But the core opening, the sentence that the tradition considers the structural foundation of the entire blessing, is this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hazan et haolam kulo betuvo. Blessed are you, the Eternal, our God, Sovereign of the universe, who nourishes the entire world in your goodness. The critical word in that sentence is the Hebrew word hazan, which means the one who provides sustenance. Not who gave sustenance once, who provides it continuously, in the present tense. The declaration you are making is not retrospective gratitude for the past meal. You are declaring your recognition of a continuous source. You are acknowledging that the provision does not begin with your effort and does not depend only on your effort. This distinction between a closed system where your effort is the total source of your provision and an open system where your effort connects to a larger source, this is the financial distinction the blessing is encoding. Every time you declare this, you are practicing the posture of a vessel that is connected to something larger than itself. And vessels that know they are connected to a source behave differently than vessels that believe they are the source. The third component is what the tradition calls zimun, the invitation. When 3 or more adults have eaten together, Birkat Hamazon is preceded by a brief call and response between the group. One person invites, "Let us bless." The others respond, "Let the name of the Eternal be blessed." If you eat alone, you still begin with a moment of internal invitation, a conscious decision to enter the blessing rather than letting it slip by as automatic speech. The Zimyun matters because it introduces intentionality. It creates a threshold. You are not sliding from eating into blessing without noticing the transition. You are marking the transition deliberately. Most people slide from task to task through their entire day without ever marking a threshold. The result is that each moment bleeds into the next, and none of them carry their full weight. The Zimyun is the practice of threshold marking. It teaches you, through daily repetition 3 times a day, to notice when one state ends and another begins. People who understand thresholds handle transition better, in business, in relationships, in the timing of decisions. The Zimyun is a training in threshold consciousness. The fourth component is the silence after the final word. Not a long silence, 30 seconds, but genuine. The blessing ends, and before you stand, before you speak about the evening, before the next thing begins, 30 seconds of held stillness. This is what the grandmother did. This is the part most people skip even when they do everything else correctly. The 30 seconds of silence after Birkat Hamazon is the integration window. It is the moment in which the posture you have just set, the acknowledgement of source, the declaration of continuous provision, the marking of the threshold, has room to settle into the body as something real rather than something said. Sound without silence has no structure. A declaration without a pause after it has no weight. The silence is not empty, it is the seal. The complete practice then is this. At the end of each meal, begin with dinner and add meals as the practice becomes natural. Sit, place both hands flat on the table, speak or sing the core opening blessing with full attention on the words. Recite or hold the Zimyun with whoever is present or internally alone. Finish the blessing and remain seated in silence for 30 seconds. Then stand. This is the complete architecture. Begin tonight, not as a religious experiment, as an engineering decision about the frequency of your household. There is one more piece I want to share with you before we close, and this piece is what I call the architecture behind the architecture. Birkat Hamazon is not only about gratitude. The deeper Kabbalistic understanding of this practice is rooted in the principle of Chazarah, return. When you receive and do not acknowledge the receipt, the channel of what you received does not remain open. In the language of the ancient teachers, the flow does not know it arrived. When you acknowledge the receipt, specifically verbally, with your body present and your hands on the table, you complete a circuit. The energy of what was received is acknowledged, and in that acknowledgement, the channel that delivered it recognizes it has been received and remains open to deliver again. This is not mysticism for its own sake. The same principle appears in every healthy economic system at the macro level. Circulation, not accumulation, is the mechanism of abundance. Money that flows is money that multiplies. Money that is hoarded stagnates. Gratitude is not an emotion, it is a circulation mechanism. Every time you practice Birkat Hamazon correctly, you are practicing circulation at the level of your household's spiritual economy. You are keeping the channel open. You are signaling to the source that what was sent arrived and was received and is ready to receive again. What I have given you today is foundational. It is one of the most powerful single practices I know for shifting the frequency of a household's relationship to provision. But I want to be truthful with you. This practice sits inside a larger body of teaching. In the complete work I have developed, built from 37 years of study and direct work with families, Birkat Hamazon connects to the Shabbat table practice, to the specific way the tradition structures the week as an economic unit, to the 4 levels of speech that the Kabbalah says govern the 4 levels of reality in which your financial life is simultaneously operating. The link to the complete teaching is in the description below. If you are serious, not curious but serious, about making a permanent architectural shift in the frequency of your household, you will find what you need there. Do not wait until the pressure increases. Move while the clarity is present. Let me prepare you for what the next 48 to 72 hours may bring, because if I do not tell you this and it happens, you may abandon the practice at exactly the moment it is beginning to work. When you begin Birkat Hamazon with genuine intention, with the hands on the table, with the full presence, with the silence at the end, something in you shifts. But almost immediately the test arrives. It might be a bill. It might be a conversation about money that goes poorly. It might be a feeling of foolishness, a voice inside you that says, "You are a grown adult sitting at a table with your hands flat and saying a blessing. What are you doing?" That voice is not wisdom. That voice is the guardian of the old frequency. It is the internal pattern that has been maintaining the ceiling by dismissing anything that might raise it. The sages had a name for this test. They called it the Yetzer, the opposing force, the contraction that precedes expansion. Every authentic spiritual practice produces this test within the first few days. The ones who pass through it are the ones who do not explain themselves to the voice. They do not argue with it, they simply continue the practice. They put their hands on the table, they say the words, they hold the silence, and they do not speak negatively about what they are building. Do not speak death over your own breakthrough. The inoculation is this: the test is evidence of movement, not evidence of failure. Stay in the practice. What you have received today is a transmission that has been carried in Jewish homes for over 3,000 years. Through the destruction of the temple, through exile, through the economic crushing of communities that should not have survived and did, this practice survived because it works, not as religion, as architecture, as a daily recalibration of the household's relationship to source, to circulation, to the posture of a vessel that knows it is connected. You are now a carrier of this knowledge. The question is whether you will be a carrier who acts on it tonight, or a carrier who files it away and wonders why the ceiling never lifts. Tell me in the comments, what is the one thing from today's teaching that you are applying first? I want to know who is taking action. I read every comment and I am looking for those names. If you are not yet subscribed, press the button and turn the bell on. Next week, I am going to reveal the specific Shabbat table practice that the wealthiest Jewish families have used for centuries to set the financial frequency for the entire week that follows, and why Friday evening is the most financially significant night in a household's 7-day cycle. You cannot afford to miss that teaching based on where you are right now. And if today's transmission reached something real in you, if something in you recognized this as a truth you already held but had never been handed in this form, press the like button. It sends this to someone who is sitting right now at an empty table, wondering why the ceiling will not move. Let it find them. May your table be a gate and not a wall. May every meal you close with intention open a channel your household has been waiting years to access. May the acknowledgement in your mouth become the abundance in your hands. May the frequency of your home rise gently and remain high. Go well. Shalom.